How am I supposed to say the words Dick Diver in this review without laughing? Hello everyone, and as you can see by the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about Tender is the Night by F.Scott Fitzgerald. Anyone who knows me well will know that The Great Gatsby is one of my all-time favourite books. It's literally in my top 3. I have read that book so many times, and I wanted to delve into F.Scott Fitzgerald's other books because his writing is so beautiful, and this book was the one that received the most mixed and negative reviews when it was first published, and that was the reason why Fitzgerald never finished another book. This is the last novel that he ever wrote to completion. It was also published 9 years after he wrote The Great Gatsby, which probably plays into a bit why the critics maybe didn't like it as much, because The Great Gatsby is a masterpiece, let's be honest. This video is going to be split into non-spoiler and spoiler sections, and I will state when the spoilers are coming, so if you haven't read it and want to read it, you can pause the video, save it, whatever, and then come back when you've finished reading the book. Dick and Nicole Diver are a wealthy American couple on holiday in the French Riviera. They meet an 18-year-old upcoming film star called Rosemary Hoyt. Dick and Rosemary have a bit of a fling, and Nicole knows about it, so their marriage is affected by that. And as a reader, you start to see the cracks emerge in what is a fragile marriage. This edition of this book, which is the Alma Classics, is split into 3 books because that was how it was published at the time. The first part is more about Dick and Rosemary meeting and the kind of affair that they have and how that comes to be. Book 2 is a flashback to how Dick met Nicole and the process of them getting together. It also then flips back to present day, and then book 3 again is in present day. I'm sorry I'm being cryptic, but if I tell you more of the details about the latter 2 books in this edition, then it'll just ruin the story for you. I'm still not fully sure whether I 100% enjoyed this or not, and when I feel that way with a book, it tends to get a 3 out of 5 stars for me, which this one did. Again, I can only really talk about that in the spoilery section. Fitzgerald just writes so elegantly and so beautifully. I am just in love with the way he strings words together. Fitzgerald, if you didn't know, was obsessed with the Jazz Age and the whole idea of the American dream. So it's kind of oddly fitting that he ended up dying from alcoholism. A weird way to end this section, but that's it for the non-spoilers. Bye-bye non-spoilery people. Bye-bye. I didn't really like the flashback of how Dick met Nicole and the whole backstory of his life and what led him to that moment, because there was just so momentum in the section where Dick and Rosemary meet that to then switch all the way back to before Dick had met his current wife, it just felt like it brought the story to a complete standstill. Also, it was incredibly long-winded, which really put me off reading it. It became more of a chore reading that section than the enjoyment that the start of it gave me. It was interesting how Nicole was actually a mental patient at the place where Dick worked, and seeing how their relationship went from a professional one to a romantic one. But it was just so long-winded. It didn't need to be that long at all. Rosemary Hoyt, to me, was the most interesting character out of everyone you're introduced to in this book, and she's hardly in it. The blurb makes out that Rosemary is the sole reason why their marriage falls apart, but really it goes that far back to before they met that she was just more kind of the tipping point than anything. You get so much of her narrative and what she's feeling about this man that she's met on the beach, and how she knows it's wrong, but at the same time she's young and she wants it anyway. But like I said, she's hardly in the book. She's there at the start, then you have the whole backstory of how Dick and Nicole get together. They meet again about 5 years after that first event in a very brief passing where they do the sexy and then return to their normal lives, and then she appears right at the end of the book again. So she just wasn't involved as much as I expected her to be and would have liked. What really shocked me was Nicole's affair with Tommy. They're just as bad as each other. You can't get mad at your husband for having an affair with an 18-year-old and then go and do the same. But this marriage, it seems, was always a mess because after Nicole got better, Dick still saw her as ill and was kind of always expecting that she may go off the rails again. Everything that he did career-wise was essentially paid for by Nicole and her family because they had so much money. He sets up a clinic in Switzerland, I believe, and the funding for that comes from Nicole's parents. So as a man in the 1920s, that's probably gonna have a bit of an effect on your ego, isn't it? The ending just felt like the right ending for this book. I was really satisfied with it. By this point, Nicole already knew about Dick and Rosemary, and now Dick knows about Nicole and Tommy. So Tommy, Nicole and Dick sit down and have an adult conversation. It's not often that you see that when an affair happens in a marriage. They sat down like adults and just talked about it. It was all very blunt and very brutal, but it was just so honest. Tommy sits there and goes, she doesn't love you anymore, she loves me. Nicole's like, yeah, that's true. Going back to what I said earlier, the most prevalent line in this conversation that Tommy actually says is, you treat her always like a patient because she was once sick, which is so true. What made me really feel for Nicole, and was the only time that I really cared about her at all as a character in this book, was when she says, you don't care for me anymore, it's just habit. Things were never the same after Rosemary. Which shows how much of a routine you get into when you're married, and how it's easier to stay in the marriage and pretend to have those same ideals and care the same way for a person just because it's convenient more than anything. And also, what would happen to all that funding and money that he's got for his clinics and all of that if he did break up with her? We never really learn what happens because they all go their separate ways. In the last chapter we find out that Nicole is married, she's happy, whereas Dick has been moving around a lot from place to place, and the last line of the book is, in any case, he is almost certainly in that section of the country in one town or another. I just love that ending because it's so ambiguous, but a good kind of ambiguous. It's nice that we don't know what happens, but at least we know that they solved their issues in a mature and adult way, and neither of them are really bitter about it because they don't talk anywhere as near as they did when they were married, obviously, but they do still talk occasionally, and that's kind of nice. And the fact that you never really know what happens after just felt like the right ending for this book. And I just really love that last line as well. Let me know what you thought about the characters. If you've read this book, who was your favourite, who was your least favourite, and I will be back for another video soon. Bye!